This is a message to all artists, to all entrepreneurs who are truly trying to make something and create something and put it out to the world. We need to stop our constant planning. We need to stop our constant talk and chatter of what we're going to do and actually start putting things into motion. And we actually need to start doing things. And that sounds a little cliche, but I want to take this one step further. I think, honestly, that not taking action has more negative consequences to our mental state than actually taking action itself. And I always say this in my podcast, in my other videos, which is I'm a firm believer in feeding our minds with the right information. And a good example of this, and I have a friend who lives in the city, and he fundamentally believes that making new friends is challenging and difficult. And this kills me because every time I see him, every time I talk to him, I realize that he's purposely making it difficult to meet new people. You know, he doesn't go say hi to his neighbors, or he doesn't go to meetups around the city to talk to other young professionals. All he does is go back to his apartment right after work. And this is where our thoughts are very powerful, and we need to realize that when we say things, we make it into a value of how we want to live our lives, and it directly correlates into our actions. And sometimes we actually make our lives harder just by our thoughts and our thinking. Let's talk about our mental blocks. You know, we all have them, and we need to start with our thought processes because these are the seeds to what the actions that we're going to put out into our lives. And the best way to describe this is, you know, before you grow any garden, we need to make sure all the rocks and the weeds are out of the ground so the seeds can fully grow and blossom into flowers, to vegetables, or whatever. And this analogy is so true with our mindset and even our thoughts. And that's why our goal, our mission in life is to pick out these weeds so we can let our mindset continue to grow and blossom into ultimately who we want to become. And that's why I'm saying our constant planning, our constant chattering about what we're going to do to put out into the world is our quote unquote weeds and rocks for our mindset. And for instance, like exercising, you know, exercising is a great example of, you know, how we constantly keep telling ourselves that we want to get healthier, we want to get skinnier, but, you know, we tell ourselves we're going to do it the next day. And what happens is the next day comes and the scenario isn't perfect. You know, you have all these errands, you have family, so you tell yourself, all right, I'm going to do this the very next day and then the next day. And what happens is that you start to train your mind to think in that way. You know, you train your mind to think that there needs to be a perfect situation where you're going to go into the gym and exercise. And that's just not true because there's no such thing as a perfect scenario, right? So, you know, another example here is like writing a paper. In high school, when I had a week deadline to write a paper, I was like, all right, I'm going to do it today. And what happens is when I get home and I try to get onto writing this paper, I make up these excuses or these things in my mind saying I can't do it today because of so and so, and I would push it off until the night before. And that's another example of how we're training our minds to push things off into the future and hoping that the perfect opportunity is going to come to do it, you know, and it's not true. And even in my personal experience of starting a project and putting it out to the world, which is the inspiration for this podcast and video, which is, you know, I've had this idea of producing this project, and I think honestly it can help a lot of people. But for the last 4 to 5 months, I've been telling myself, all right, I'm going to do it when this is in place, or I'm going to do it when I'm feeling a certain way. And the reality is, I'm never going to feel a certain way for me to do this. So it's simply by just taking action and pushing things forward. That's the only way I'm going to get things done, even when I'm feeling uncomfortable. And a few tips here is that, you know, we need to start sooner than later, you know, just from my personal experience, just from, you know, hearing other people telling me these things, which is we need to start sooner because we're going to train our minds to think in that way of like, all right, I don't care if the scenario is not right or the situation's not perfect. I need to start doing things so we can gain that momentum. And I think the biggest thing here is that we need to fall in love with criticism. And this is really difficult for a lot of people. This is definitely difficult for me, and this is the reason why it took me 5 months to actually put things out into the world, because, you know, since my projects are an extension of me and my personality, I'm afraid that if someone criticizes it, it's going to be a direct insult to me. And then that's like the type of mindset I was starting to slowly grow. And I'm thankful that I was able to recognize that before I went down this really negative path. And the last one is we need to make failure our best friend. And it's really awesome. It's really great to know now, which is, any sort of success, any sort of project that you want to put out into the world, we need to realize that failure is a prereq to making things happen in the world. That's just the true fact. No one gets, into the scene and, becomes famous or all these other things, unless they went through a trial of failing a lot of times. So we need to realize that. In the art of being mindful, we need to recognize our minds and bodies are meant to be moving. Our mind and body are meant to be creating new things. So we need to stop falling into the traps of constant planning and thinking, because that's when we start to paralyze ourselves, and that's when we start to break apart and fall into the traps of insecurity and doubt. And I think the best way is simply to just to overcome that fear is just to start. Just let that momentum push you forward. And I'm going to leave you guys with this one question, which is, what are you going to start today? With that one action today, it's going to give you that momentum to push you forward the next day. So let's ask ourselves that. What's one thing we're going to start today?